Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
So he got re-elected to implement the Big Four agenda, only to find a cancerous problem that has been haunting Kenyans for generations now. According to the World Population Review and the US News, Kenya came 9th in world's most top 10 corrupt countries in a list that was topped by Nigeria, Colombia, and Pakistan in the first, second, and third position, respectively. Since he was sworn in, Mr. DPP, Nurdin Haji, may I have it? Thank you so much, Aftumbo. Since he was sworn in 28th March 2018, the DPP, Mr. Nurdin Haji, has made corruption his #1 agenda, going for both the small and the big fish. Is he getting enough support from the executive, leave alone the other parts of the government, the legislature and the judiciary? We are here to discuss that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Faisal, Kassim, and welcome to Live Real Talk, when we are talking about war on corruption. And joining me this evening, we have Mr. Furqan, Chacha, and Swaleh, Kibichi, Yusuf. Assalamu alaikum, gentlemen.
Wa alaikum salam.
Karibuni maji.
Shukran.
Gentlemen, karibuni sana. Mr. Swaleh Kibichi is an advocate of the High Court, and Furqan Chacha, of course, you've seen him time and time again right here at the studio. Remember, you can be part of this conversation. Horizon TV Kenya on all our social media platforms, and 0711707707, that's our call in live, and 22951 on our SMS line. Tweet me, let's talk. Do you think it's time corruption to be declared a national disaster in this country? Joining the conversation, gentlemen, karibuni sana. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, established under Section 3, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution in Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Act of 2011, of which this comes out after the first legislation enactment against graft goes back to 1956. And yet, if anything, we are looking at corruption being on an ascending trajectory. It's increasing by the day. What is going wrong where? Mr. Swaleh.
I think the issue to do with corruption is not merely on the issues of law that are in place in terms of the laws and the acts. The issue is to do with implementation in terms of getting these people who are involved in corruption scandals.
Exactly. And thanks. What do you mean by that? Maybe if you could just expound.
I mean, from, for example, 1956, we've always been having these particular laws. In 2003, the same act was basically replaced. We also have an amendment that was done in 2019, but still you get the view that still nothing is going forward. And that's the reason why I'm saying the issues is not to do with law. We have abundance of law in terms of corruption issues. The issue is to do with now implementation.
So if you're looking at the implementation, Mr. Furqan Chacha, then where does the buck stop? With whom does the buck stop for as far as implementation is concerned?
When it comes to implementation, you see, there are so many factors and also so many dynamics. You see, and it's an historical thing. I think it's my perspective or my position that this is one of the most negative aspects that were inherited from colonialism that has not been of any good to the nation.
Okay.
Implementation, it will all depend also with how the evidence has been gathered. And you see, we'll also at the same time need to have the political goodwill that we really need to deal with this menace. You see, when a set of laws are set up only to deal with the poor, and then the top in society, they end up becoming untouchables because of the proximity to power, then we'll just be going round circles.
On the flip side, we're looking at the DPP, Mr. Nurdin Haji, of course. Since his swearing in 28th March 2018, we've seen a lot of prosecutions, but from where we are sitting, there's zero conviction And the other day he was blaming the judiciary, saying that they're doing the best they can, but again, the judiciary still releases people on bail and the corrupt officials are still being celebrated outside there. What's your take on that, Mr. Yusuf? Because you're saying that implementation is a problem with the laws, yet on the other hand, we're having these institutions that are trying to implement, but some functions of the government are quote unquote not being supportive enough with the Kamata Friday.
To be able to respond, when you're dealing with the issues to do with corruption, we have not to forget about the dictates of the Constitution. Article 49, 1H talks about the presumption of innocence. When these convictions go to court or go to trial, the court has to make or strike a balance between them getting their personal liberty and the convictions. Court has to be hesitant. The mere fact that a person is convicted of a corrupt offense does not mean in itself that this person is guilty. We have to go through the court process so that we can be able to establish if this person is either guilty or not.
What are we looking at for as far as the court process is concerned? Would you mind taking us through the court process?
Yes. For example, when the first matter is done, for example, a charge sheet is crafted and the offense is corruption-related matter. When you go to trial, parties are at liberty. By virtue of Article 49, 1H of the Constitution of Kenya, parties are at liberty to be released on bail, reasonable bail and term and conditions, on the basis that bail, they're being accorded their right to liberty to go back home and come back. The issues to do with bail is only meant to be able to secure the attendance of a person in court. So in light of Article 50 of the Constitution of presumption of innocence,
until proven guilty, of course.
Yes, we have to go through the court process so that this person can be able to be established to have been related to issues to do with corruption or not. So there's usually a procedure whereby, for example, there'll be a bail hearing. The court will be able to make a determination on whether this person is deserving of bail or not.
On the flip side is that some advocates argue the moment these prosecutors agree to the bail, then the accused tends to interfere with the evidence collection process. Mr. Furqan,
I think
because you're looking at this one, corruption, particularly the Mr. DPP Nurin Haji has already like set the bar and set the standard. He's going for the big fish. He doesn't care who you are, the position you're holding. He's coming after you for as long as you're sniffing on public coffers.
That announcement is welcomed. At least from the face of it, we might sense seriousness. But you see, it doesn't end there. And then you see, it's not about kamata. It's about the quality of evidence that has been collected by the investigators. It doesn't really matter whether somebody is held in custody and is not given his constitutional right to bond, or whether they're released on very lenient bond terms. It all boils down to the quality of evidence that has been collected by the investigators. If the investigations were sham, then you see the rest will just be frogs making so much noise, but the cows will still continue drinking the water from the river.
Interesting. Mr. Yusuf, I'd just like to take you back on something that you said we are not in shortage of laws in this country on matters corruption. Now, would you mind just stating, is it that the laws are ambiguous or it's the total disregard of the rule of law altogether? Would you mind enlightening us on what the Constitution says about corruption and our views?
I will begin with the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the Republic. I'll take you to Chapter 6 of the Constitution, and in light of the discussions that we're having, and I'll also take you through, for example, Article 10 of the Constitution. One of the national values of the Constitution of the Republic is to issues to do with, for example, integrity, issues to do with leadership, issues to do with, for example, avoidance of corrupt practices. The law is very comprehensive in terms of curbing the issues to do with corruption. We have that particular Article 10, which comprehensively and explicitly identify corruption as, by corruption I mean avoidance of corruption, as one of the very national values of the Constitution. If you look strictly at the dictates of Chapter 6, it's basically revolving around the issues to do with leadership and integrity. And one of the core issues that has been addressed is the issues to do with corrupt practices. It is meant to curb corrupt practices. And Chapter 6 of the Constitution addresses leadership, leaders, for example, state officers. In 2003, the corruption laws that was in existence was replaced by Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, which basically squarely addresses the issues to do with corruption on all organs of the government. It also addresses corruption in terms of economic crimes and all that. And that's the reason why I'm saying, in terms of laws to do with corruption, we are safely and explicitly contained.
Interesting. Now, with all that laws, of course, and implementation and execution of the laws being a problem, even as we're going to look at some point in our show, when it's being implemented and some laws being enforced, then we're having some leaders coming out and saying that this law on corruption is turning out to be subjective. Before we get there, Mr. Furqan, Chacha, do you think it's time for corruption to be declared a national disaster? Maybe the president would put more focus on it as opposed to the Big Four agenda that will leave a legacy.
Corruption has been the biggest letdown in as long as the development of this nation is concerned. And we've never even had a disaster before that has really dragged or pulled this nation to the knees compared to corruption. Then you see it's disturbing why it has not been declared to be a national disaster this far. You see, I don't know, you see, corruption has a very huge inclination to political patronage.
Yes.
Unfortunately so. So I think that is where now the catch-22 is. But from the recent developments, I think there is a silence message that political patronage will no longer come for your defense. So you just carry your own stones.
Interesting question you came with. But now the thing is it really war on corruption, or it is stopping some individuals from ascending to power by slashing the wings of some lieutenants to some big political bigwigs, big names in this country?
I think it is war against corruption. Politicians have basically tried to twist so that it appears that these particular convictions are directed towards them. But in my own considered opinion, corruption is corruption.
Corruption is corruption.
Corruption is corruption.
Of course, and that will beg another question, and I'll still direct it to you then. What's the criteria or the criterion that's being used in this war against corruption and gang down some individuals and leave some other individuals? Because we're looking, for example, looking at the dam scandal that just came weeks after the dossier on the JKA that was released on mainstream and social media. But of course, the dam scandal, the dam issue now just came and covered the JKA issue altogether. So what's the criterion or criteria that's being used to pick up these cases on matters corruption?
For me, it has to do with the existence of evidence, the threshold. If you realize corruption borders on criminality, and in our Kenyan laws, such crimes have a higher threshold in terms of beyond reasonable doubt.
Okay.
So I don't think that it is inclined towards other people, with the exception of other people. I think it has to do with the threshold.
Yeah.
Because, for example, if the officer of the ODPP decides to, for example, indict someone with regards to a corruption case, focus should be in terms of the threshold of evidence that is there.
Okay.
I think we should give time in terms of these particular convictions.
Okay.
I believe it's objective. I believe should there be evidence enough to be able to convict these people, then we'll be able to see.
So you feel it's objective?
It is
and
objective.
Not subjective.
It is
Still
objective.
have more questions regarding that. I'm sure Mr. Furqan Chacha has a lot to say on that as well. And that is how we are going on a very short break, because my director, Suleiman Nachas, is telling me that, Faisal, we need to pay our bills. And I hear you, director. We are going on a very short break. Don't go away. We'll be back.
On the next episode,
why do they insist in drawing a certain thing? They regularly say, I want to draw this. When you ask them several questions, it's the same thing over and over again.
For example, if a kid is continuously drawing the family, maybe it's because the family has it has an impact on the child's life. So every time he thinks of something, the family comes up first.
Ramadan, Ramadan, Ramadan and Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah and Dhul Hijjah. These are the months of Islam.
Is it a must that I change my last name to my husband's first name? No, it is not a must, and you don't have to change your name. You are your father's daughter until the day of Qiyamah. So you maintain your father's name.
on the next episode.
Mtume akamwambia Muadh, njoo. Muadh akaja akakaa karibu na Mtume sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Mtume akamwambia Muadh, nipatie mkono wako. Muadh akampatia mkono Mtume sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Alafu Mtume akamwambia Muadh, ya Muadh, wallahi inni la uhibbuk. Muadh, wallahi mimi nakupenda wewe Muadh.
زمن جميل كان فيه سمونا كانت به أمجادنا تتوالى.
Welcome back. I'm reading a report by the Gun International Integrity, a report released in June 2017 that actually categorizes the Kenyan judicial system as the most corrupt. And I'm here with advocates, senior counsel and high court advocate. And we're going to get to that. But still, we were talking about whether the war on corruption, fronted, of course, by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and Office of the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, it is subjective or objective, because we've had claims from some quarters that this is being subjective and not objective. That's why we asked what criteria is being used to pin down these quote-unquote corrupt officers that are being prosecuted. Mr. Furqan Chacha, of course, Mr. Yusuf told us that it's all about the power of the evidence that's being presented. But from where I'm sitting, do you think there's some level of biasness on what you give priority over the other?
They say human beings are a political being. And you see, it depends from which angle you look at it. If you look at it from a political point of view, and by the end of the day, it appears like it's people that you are aligned with that are being arrested and taken to court, then you might use it as a scapegoat and a campaign strategy that you see crime victim. so that by the end of the day, come 2022, then you can take over power and seal the loopholes. But if you look at it from the other point of view, that due process that needs to be done, it could be a coincidence that you've arrested people, the only people that you have been arrested are from the same community. But by the end of the day, as the way my colleague has put it, it depends with the threshold of evidence. If by the end of the day there is no evidence, then that other argument will be solidified, that it is not objective.
Sinis, just maybe to further promote, it's not that I'm pushing or pulling in any divide, any political divide. It's just that we need to get a clarification on this. I think it's very important to get a clarification on this. Governor of the Kiambu, His Excellency Waititu, is actually facing a corruption charge of 588 million, okay, of which that's an irregular award tendering process, as they say. On the flip side, we have a report that was released by the Auditor General in June 30th, 2017, regarding Kisumu County, where at least 1,359,986,921 shillings could not be accounted for. The Auditor General's report said that some of the county-funded projects were only complete on paper and not physically on the ground. This is a case that we're looking at in a county that is supported, quote-unquote, by the system, as opposed to the other county that's alluded to be supporting the Tanga movement, fronted by the DPU, of course, being the kingpin. Yes, don't you think this war on corruption is being subjective? Because this is a report from a trusted government entity, the Auditor General's office. Don't you think it's a good base to start over the whole corruption scandal case?
My take is, and like I alluded to the fact previously, right now we are experiencing convictions that the office of the DPP, together with the investigating authorities, that is the police, have gone through the evidence, have tried to establish, have basically compiled, and now, according to them, the same is enough in terms of...
You meant prosecution and not conviction, right?
Yes.
Prosecution and not conviction, yeah. Because we have seen a lot of prosecutions, but zero convictions yet.
True.
Yeah?
True. That's what I'm saying. In the fullness of time, we are yet to be able to see in terms of these other issues that have been alluded to, for example, the Kisumu County.
Yeah.
My take and my considered opinion is the first step and the most elementary process in terms of criminal process is establishing the evidence. If the evidence is not enough, then it is as good as, the prosecution is as good as dead upon arrival.
Interesting. You're nodding. Is it in acceptance of what he said? Or?
No, as in I'm in confused state.
Yes.
Because you see, all this noise that is being made, the way you've placed it, as in, see, you look at Kisumu, there are some figures that are yet to be accounted for. You see, there is no direct complaint or allegation that somebody must have squandered the figures. But the moment the Auditor General puts it forward that there has been no accountability, then there's a unit within the government that is supposed now to step in and, you see, distinguish the facts from the falsehood. And
Which
then
is that unit?
We have the DPP together with the DCI. Okay. They're the ones who are now supposed to come in and establish whether, if it's true that projects have been completed on paper and there is no physical project,
evidence,
then prima facie it looks like there is false play. But you see, there's so much finger pointing and so much noise is trying to confuse this war against corruption. Because you see, when we went for voting, Kiambu voted for the government which is in power.
Yes.
Kisumu opposed the government which is in power. So if somebody is to come and say that the government is haunting them, you see, that's why I was nodding my head as in, I don't really get it. But the bottom line, this so much noise is trying to confuse this
war
on corruption.
Of course, and I strongly feel from where I'm seated down, from where I'm seated, I think the office of the DPP, you can correct me because you are legal officers sitting here, the office of the DPP, of which the DPP himself was once a High Court advocate, you can correct me. I think he has not come out clear and proved to Kenyans that this war on corruption is actually objective than subjective, because if anything, you're looking at it being subjective, targeting a particular group. Because on the other side as well, we are looking at NYS 1, NYS 2, it's no longer relevant in Kenyans' ears, and we all know, I mean, it's something that's outside there in the public domain about the money that was lost, but yet we're looking at other cases of some people who have pledged their allegiance to the Tanga side. Of course, from where I'm sitting, from a layman's perspective, that's how I'm looking at it. Before looking at other factors contributing to corruption, we have a whole body by the government, taxpayers' money, being used for investigations, paying salaries, buying resources for that office, yet that is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. They have a whole house for them, they have a whole building for themselves. Yet we're looking at other offices like Office of the DPP and Office of the DCI coming in the war against corruption. What does it tell us about the whole institution of Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission? Swaleh.
My take will be that it paints a bad picture in terms of the commission having been established since the inception of the constitution, and we are in the recent past we are seeing high-profile matters that are being instituted by the office of the DPP. To me, without mincing word, I believe there is laxity. There have been laxity in terms of these independent institutions and commissions, in terms of prosecuting.
So you think the commission, there is a problem with this commission. Do you agree, Mr. Furqan Chacha?
I'm taking a broader view to this issue. I think collectively, as a nation, we should just admit that we failed, and we should, after that admission, then we should decide now to start from a clean slate.
Where do we start?
Because
how do we do it? Who is supposed to do it? Who's supposed to do the first bullet?
You see, these are just institutions set up by the Constitution.
Yes.
But these institutions, in order to run, there has to be individuals. And when it comes to Fridays, although Muslims are praying 5 times a day, but you see, Friday is a big day.
Yes.
It's a small Eid. Majority of the Muslims will go to the mosque. If it's a Sunday, majority of the Christians will go to mosque. So it even, like, by extension, these institutions that are supposed to mold individuals to be moral, upright individuals of the states, rather than just limiting ourselves to these institutions, these other institutions have equally failed. Because the same people are being accused of corruption. They're the same people who give fat and bigger donations. And then at the same time, they get a lot of praise, and the front seats are always preserved for them.
Interesting.
It's sort of, they've also like bought or reserved a seat in paradise.
Something that we're going to talk about, definitely, about glorification of the corrupt individuals. But one thing that needs to come out clear, do you think the whole Commission of Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has failed? Do you think so? Do you agree with that?
They've, okay, I can't say outrightly that they've failed, but they've not lived up to the expectations.
They've not lived up to the expectations. I think that's, you're equally calling them a failure, unless there's a different English to that, Mr. Yusuf. Do you think so? We're equally calling them that they failed. If they did not live up to the expectations, that means they failed Kenyans to deliver on their mandate as a commission.
It will be unfair to be able to quote that and that. I will think it's more to do with the speed in the prosecution. There's been laxity in terms of prosecuting.
Because if we're looking at the origin of the question, we're looking at the EACC, which is the whole commission mandated to do this. Okay, they are laxing until the office of the DPP and the office of the DCI are coming in and fronting the war on corruption. So that's why we are asking, is the commission failed? Is it dead? Is it just a big white elephant sitting on the CBD?
At times, I think there's some oversights. That's why you see with time they realized that the approach that was used was not the right approach, because you'll find some of the officers from the commission, maybe they cannot affect arrest. They realize that we have to work hand in hand with the DCI. They're the ones who have the constitutional powers to effect the arrests. And I think at times we just do firefighting. We don't think out these strategies in depth or in detail. Because we just want to be seen to be doing something, so we just hurriedly set up commissions, and then along the way we realize, no, we are not doing it right. So, and in that, as we do that, we go on spending so much resources, taxpayers' money, which also goes to waste. That's why we have so much legislation, so many laws, but our number one problem still remains to be corruption.
Thank you. So is it time we re-evaluate this institution and this commission and see if we can put up proper, competent personnel to run this commission? Do you think so? And if yes, then what's the role of the citizens in ensuring that this happens?
I think the best way forward will be, in terms of this institution, they work hand in hand. There is the EACC, there is the Office of the DPP, there is the DCI. I think the best way forward will be maybe to come up with laws or strategies that these particular institutions are acting hand in hand to be able to come up with such prosecution.
Interesting. So despite the change of Kenya, the change of names from KCA to EACC, still we're looking at nothing really being happening, nothing actually happening on the ground for as far as execution is concerned. So again, the question comes, where does the citizen comes in ensuring a change in this particular commission? Do we take to the streets? Do we petition? Do we gather signatures? What do we do?
You see, at times you can't really blame the citizens, but at the same time, the citizens also stand to be blamed.
It's our tax, it's our money that's being wasted by running these particular institutions.
In fact, you've rephrased it the best way I could have think of it. If it's our money, you see, it's like we're not, it doesn't pinch us. It's like we don't feel it. If it was indeed our money, then we must have this continuous follow-ups. And then you see, whenever they set up these commissions, there has to be a period within which review has to be done so that we can ascertain how successful has it been, how unsuccessful has it been, do we need to change strategy? But you see, the problem is that the citizenship suffer from this short memory amnesia. As in, when an issue comes up, it becomes the issue. Euphoria. But the next day when something else comes, it's Linturi's soap opera, then we all move to the soap opera. We forget
about the real issue.
We forget about the real issues.
Okay.
And then you see, even with the founding fathers, the moment they say that ignorance is number one problem, they've made sure that ignorance remains so that they can always misuse the citizen. But the moment the citizens will become conscious, and then we kill what divides the citizens, because this country is so tribal. You see, and these are some of the hazes. You see, the obscure, what obscures the citizen's image. The moment somebody who gave him kitu kidogo during the campaigns is being labeled as corrupt, that one cannot be possible. But you see, the values that we talk about, if we make them real, and the civic education is intensified, then we just look at what is right, regardless of the affiliations, regardless of tribe, then we'll take the right course towards the right direction.
So it starts with you and I.
Certainly.
In the words of the president, usalama inaanza na mimi na wewe. Even stopping corruption starts with you and I. Let's hear more about that after we come back to this very short break.
On the next episode,
why do they insist in drawing a certain thing? They regularly say, I want to draw this. When you ask them several questions, it's the same thing over and over again.
For example, if a kid is continuously drawing the family, maybe it's because the family has it has an impact on the child's life. So every time he thinks of something, the family comes up first.
Ramadan and Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah and Dhul Hijjah. These are the months of Islam.
Exactly 16 minutes to the top of the hour. That is 8:44 p.m. East African time. We are talking about war on corruption, and as we close in the second segment, we say that ufisadi, kumaliza ufisadi, au vita dhidi ufisadi, the war on corruption starts with you and I. So how do we do that? Because in the Kenyan system, we're looking at the prosecuted ones being glorified. Look at the current governor for Kirinyaga, Her Excellency Waiguru. You know, she was prosecuted. Among many others, were prosecuted against the charges of the NYS 1 and NYS 2. Yet right now, she's holding a public office, voted, by the way, not appointed, voted, you know, overwhelmingly by the Kirinyaga citizens, among many other examples. So these corrupt officials are actually getting glorification from the people on the ground. How do we tackle this issue for as far as civil education is concerned on the ground? Mr. Swaleh.
I think corruption has to be labeled and molded in such a way that we understand the seriousness of the offense. Corruption has taken away a lot of things for the citizenry. These people who engage themselves in corruption, they end up getting those amounts of money, and because of the poverty that the citizenry is involved in, it is very difficult. It is diluted by the mere fact that these people will go campaign with the money and have these people come back to office, hold offices. I believe going forward, Chapter 6 of the Constitution should be taken seriously. We should consider implementing it with a lot of seriousness that it deserves.
But again, still the same, Chapter 1, the first clause in the Constitution clearly states and clearly gives the power to the Mwananchi, and these leaders are elected. I mean, the power lies with the Mwananchi, with the Wanjiku and the Fatuma and the Abdallah down there. And these are the people who are actually voting in the quote-unquote corrupt officials. So how do you go about it? Because when you're looking at Chapter 6, this is on another level of implementation. But again, the first step is the Mwananchi down there. Chapter 1 of the Constitution, the sovereignty lies with the person down there. And he's the one casting the vote to vote in this person that her or his name appeared in a corruption scandal. So how do you go about that?
You see, we've, as I'd earlier indicated, that ignorance was highlighted as part of the major problems that this nation needs to fight. But there is lack of sincerity in as far as the political leadership is concerned. In as far as the populace is ignorant, it is to their advantage. Okay. So even Chapter 1 that you're referring to, you see, you stop an ordinary Kenyan along the street and trying to ask them for them to like expound their understanding that they are the supremacy of the ones that matter. You see, for them, in as far as they are concerned, the ones that matter are the leaders that they themselves have elected. Okay. The only time that Mwananchi counts is when he wakes up at 2, 3 a.m. with with Githeri lining to vote. That's the only time that the Mwananchi matters. Thereafter, the Mwananchi doesn't factor anywhere. But until and unless we take civic education seriously, not just for purposes of passing exams in primary school, seriously making sure that every child is made to appreciate.
Who to make sure?
You see, the society, we have education. But
where
you see,
does it start? Where does the buck stop? Because every time we're talking about the society, the word comes out quite ambiguous. So who within the society to ensure that this happens?
We have structures, and at the same time, you see, we also have the parents. You see, if the parents are also not conscious, it will be something inherited.
Okay.
Yeah, it's automatic also the kids won't be conscious.
Interesting.
You see, because it's the parents who are supposed to fend for the children. So if they are suffering and the leadership has made it so tough for them to survive, they should be able to explain to their children as to why things are tough. And then when they come to age, then they should make sure that they're choosing the right leaders, not because they are from the same tribe.
Or not because you are from the same village.
Not, yeah.
Mr. Swaleh, gun integrity. This is coming from a gun business anti-corruption portal that ranks the judicial system as #1 corrupt institution in the country. Why is this happening? Why is this so? And this is not the first time. This is a report released in June 2017.
It's a bit difficult.
These are the people who are supposed to be implementing, right? To be implementing and help us in executing the law. But, I mean, we are looking at them being the front runners in establishing corruption. How? Why? Mr. Swaleh?
It's very unfortunate that the same is the case. You look at the court process and you can be able to see a lot of particularly spaces and to be able to be used by those people who can be able to get money. You look at the way, for example, bail is set up. It gives you the feeling, for example, that a person who's monetarily having money can be able to secure his right of liberty, as opposed to a person who does not, for example, do not have money to be able to secure his freedom. I believe these particular spaces that are being used as mischief could be the reason as to why the judicial process has been used. A lot has been done in terms of the steps that has been taken in terms of the judiciary. It was one of the arms of the government that was being manipulated, but I believe it's progressive realization in terms of them having, for example, security of tenure. Going forward, we should consider coming up with structures that could be able to shield them from being susceptible to
shield these institutions.
Yes, so that we can
of
be
course,
able to
which
blame
brings
them.
me to my next point, because Furqan, Chacha, you told us about ignorance, being one of the key factors that's making Kenyans where we are at right now for as far as corruption is concerned. Funny enough, according to this report that was released in June 2017, #1 function corrupt official, you're looking at the judicial system, followed by the police, followed by the public services, followed by the land administration. Coming after them is tax administration department, then customs administration, public procurement, natural resources, legislation, civil society. I mean, these are all elites. Elites, for God's sake. And we're still talking about ignorance contributing to corruption. Is it smartness? Is it just exploiting on the Wanjiko? What exactly is it?
See, by talking about ignorance, you see, it's the appreciation of values. It's not about having a certificate. You see, being empowered, having information easily accessible of your responsibilities, your duties as a citizen. It's not all about having papers. And then you see this ignorance is compounded by these other allegiances. You see, whereby this is from my village, this is from this particular area. And then you see it doesn't distinguish between who a professor and a layman in the village. You see, there are people who have degrees, but they can still be perceived as being ignorant out of their behavior, because families, the community, society is not getting any value from what they hold as qualifications. So in fact, they are a detriment and a liability to society. So about the accusations and the complaints, you see, it's a very thin line, the way we always hear it, between love and hate. You see, like if the police, the prosecution, doesn't have refined evidence, and then a suspect is eventually acquitted, they can easily say that there was corruption with the judiciary.
Interesting.
And on the other side, there could be watertight evidence, and then you end up getting an acquittal. You see, there'll still be a complaint that there could be corruption, but most of it is perceptions. Like you see that the report that you've made reference to, you see, when they say Lands Commission, what is the basis of that finding?
Okay.
You see, they also leave us in darkness. You see, we'll continue suspecting one another without any facts or without any basis.
They've captured their reference there well. They've captured their reference. Some of their references are Global Competitive Report 2016-2017, Investment Climate Report 2016. There's another reference was County Public Officers' Experiences in 2015. Nonetheless, not mentioning the tons of reports by the Attorney General's office, of course. I mean, all over East African Bribery Index, Kenya 2014 as well. These are just some among the many sources that they got this information from. Anyway, moving on. Looking at the society now, for as far as war against corruption is concerned, let's look at the religious institutions. Swaleh, do you think the religious institutions are doing enough for as far as war against corruption is concerned?
I believe corruption attacks on the virtues and vices. It's more like a vice. I believe more lives to be done in terms of the same being a vice, to be able to be made clearly to people that it's not something that is to be proud of. I believe the religious institutions and the religious leaders should be able to do more, so that instead of corruption being glorified, corruption should be made to be a vice, because it is a vice.
Okay. Furqan, Chacha, maybe as you're winding up, we get your parting shot.
Okay, since that you've brought in the issue of religious institutions,
yeah.
You see, the irony is that we live in a secular state.
Yes.
Whereby religion has been given a backseat. So when we start turning around and trying to expect to have some influence from religious institution, I think we are shooting ourselves in the feet. Now we are coming to the realization that, you see, these virtues that are supposed to be driven by religion, they're supposed to have a place in our interactions, in our daily interactions, whether it be in government, in the family, so that we can have these checks and balances.
Okay.
And then the way my learned friends has put it, you see, the moment we'll start shunning people who have corrupt backgrounds. You see, the way Justice Mumbi has put it the other day, you see, he's brought in a shocker. As in the moment you are suspected, you see, in other developed countries, so-called developed, the moment you're suspected of anything, even before evidence starts coming out, people step aside.
Yeah.
But for us, I'd rather die, rather die instead of stepping aside. So you see, the culture that we've come up with since colonialism, I think it's our greatest undoing. Until we re-edit and start afresh, then we'll just go on or go in circles.
Interesting. Can I take that as your parting shot?
You're welcome.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Sir, would you mind giving us your parting shot?
Okay. I believe going forward, I'm optimistic about the fight against corruption. I believe people should be patient in terms of these convictions or these prosecutions being successful at the end of it all. But I believe going forward, the institutions that are involved should be able to cooperate. I also believe that we need to rethink about the values that we have in our society. Corruption is a vice, and it should be. I believe going forward, corruption should be made such that all these people who are involved in it should not form part of the leaders, because if we continue the cycle, we could not be able to fight against corruption.
Thanks so much, gentlemen. Certainly, Sana. Worth to note that we extended an invitation to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, and they confirmed until last minute. But as you clearly see, the seat is still empty. Expecting to see you soon, sir. You know who I'm talking about. I'm going to finish with words from two wise gentlemen. One is the late Kofi Annan, who said, if corruption is a disease, then transparency is an essential part of the treatment. The other wise man is Angel Grier, who said, integrity, transparency, and fight against corruption have to be part of the culture. They have to be thought as fundamental values. This is what he said. Until corruption grew to be where it is right now, you and I must have played a part. If not you and I, then your neighbor, or your brother, or your sister, with very simple acts from home. It has become part of our lives. It has become part of our cultures. So what role are you playing to accelerate and to fuel corruption? Think about it, and think about how you are going to play it again and again and again in reverse in the fight against corruption. I've been your host, Faisal Kassim. See you next week, same place, same time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Gentlemen, thank you. Asanteni sana. Jazakallah khair. Furqan, asanteni sana. Thank you so much for coming. Asanteni sana. Handshake, yeah?